Absolutely brilliant sound, of course, courtesy of the Dodgers radio network, as is our next guest here on Damon and Ratto. He is the voice of the Dodgers, Charley Steiner, nice enough to join us to talk a little baseball. And obviously, Charley, the Dodgers family, all of baseball, didn't just lose a family member last night. We lost our patriarch of all sportscasting as far as we're concerned. The great broadcasters all genuflect in one direction, and that was the direction of Vin Scully. Thank you so much for joining us. Can we just start with where you were when you got the news? I'm assuming you got it before we did.
Yeah, he had been in ill health for a while, and I knew 2 or 3 days ago the end was near. And I got a call last night about a half hour or 45 minutes before it was released. And even knowing and even expecting, it was still a horrific gut punch. I'm in this business because of him. When I was 5 years old, and the first time I listened to a baseball game on the radio, the Brooklyn Dodgers, and I heard the sound of the crowd and the crack of the bat and this overarching voice, I was that RCA Victor dog just staring at the speaker. And really from the time I was 5, that's all I ever wanted to be when I grew up. And so in losing Vin, who over the years, thankfully, had become a second father in many ways, a mentor, an icon, and ultimately a friend, it was one of those that has hit me, and I've been talking to a lot of folks today about Vin, and I keep thinking, well, the more I talk about it, the easier it's going to get. I hope that may happen tomorrow, but it's been a tough day. It was a tough night last night, and he was, next to my dad, the most important man in my life.
As somebody who worked with him, how hard was it for you not to fall into the trap that a lot of broadcasters did of trying to sound like him? Because he was the most influential baseball broadcaster probably of all time, I think it's fair to say. So how did you manage to maintain the discipline not to end up trying to sound like a clone of his?
If it hurts when you do this, don't do this. That's simple. I mean, Vin was a master. The very first time I introduced Vin, it was spring training 2005 in Vero Beach. There had just been a horrific hurricane, and we weren't sure whether or not we were going to play that day. Palm trees were down and scattered. The electronic scoreboard was dangling by an electronic cord. And I'm trying to describe it as best as I possibly can. And then it's time for me, for the first time, to introduce him. Ladies and gentlemen, now in his 50-something year, whatever it was, as the voice of the Dodgers, here's Vin Scully. As I did it, I got goosebumps, and I said, I can't believe I am doing this. And then he says, thank you. And then he talks about the palm trees. And the palm trees, there were old ones that were down and crushed, and they weren't coming back. There were some that were hanging on by a thread, and then there were some young palm trees that happened to survive. And as he surveyed the scene of palm trees, he said, but isn't that like life anyway? And I went, oh, man, I can't play on this level. I was just dumbstruck and just awe-inspired by the simplicity with which he saw these palm trees in utter disarray, some still standing, some barely hanging on. And in that sentence, I said, all right, Chucky, don't go there. So you didn't. Vin was Vin, and anybody who tried to be Vin, that's a fool's errand. All I could do is do the best that I could, and again, I got to know him so well for so long. when he was just starting out, when he was 20 and hired by Red Barber, Vin reminded me of this story. He said, Red came to him one day and he said, you have something that nobody else on earth has. And Vin's all ready to have his ego blown out of proportion. And Red said, you are yourself. You are nobody else. Just be the best that you can be. So it's a long-winded answer of saying, I wasn't even going to go into that neighborhood. I didn't. And we ended up living happily ever after.
Charley Steiner, voice of the Dodgers on the radio here on 95.7 The Game. What was his level of self-awareness about the impact he had on broadcasting, not just baseball, but football as well? The Masters. I mean, there's no such thing as an egoless broadcaster, and I'm sure Vin would be the first to tell you he was also indeed a human. But what was his real level of awareness of how on top of the pecking order of all of this he always was?
I think he was aware. It was certainly nothing that he dwelled upon. He was as comfortable in his own skin as almost anybody I have ever met. He didn't want the attention. He didn't need the attention. He would go home after the game, and he'd come back the next day. So that stuff was really secondary to him. He clearly knew he was good at what he did, but I think to some degree the attention that he received embarrassed him. Then, in many ways, we were similar and set talent and all of that other stuff aside. But he didn't like to be in crowds and didn't like being at parties and that sort of thing. And I asked him about it one day. I said, all right, so help me get through that. And he says, it really boils down to the 4 B's. Oh, what are the 4 B's? Be there, be early, be seen, be gone. And I've lived with that from the moment he shared that with me, and that's what it was. So self-awareness, I suppose, but it was certainly nothing he ever talked about.
So you have a game tonight, and how do you fight the impulse to think about him, or do you just give in to it? I'm not in San Francisco. When the Dodgers return home Friday for the Padres, I will be there. But last night, when the story was made public, the radio station called and asked me if I would just get on with Tim Neverett and Rick Monday, and I did. We basically disregarded a half inning of the game, and just Mo and I talked about our memories with him. Ray, you've been up there enough over the years. We had that back room where we had dinner every night or lunch before a game. And over the years, Mo and I calculated we had upwards of well over 1,000 meals with him. That lasted anywhere from a half hour to an hour and a half, depending on day, time, and circumstances. And so we knew each other on a level that that most others did not. So Mo and I have been so fortunate to have been the caboose on Vin's train all those years. I'm more thinking about Friday when the Dodgers return home for the big game with the Padres, and it will be the first time a public outpouring for Vin. How that plays itself out, how it manifests itself, I have no idea.
Charley, thank you so much for sharing your personal memories and your professional memories of a true icon who passed away. I feel like we'd almost be doing Vin a disservice if we didn't talk just a scotch of baseball with you. So let me just ask, how about them Padres, huh? I mean, who would have ever thought that they would have turned into a powerhouse that has sort of flipped baseball on its head a little bit?
We have a race. For years and years and years, the folks in San Diego consider themselves rivals with the Dodgers. And I would often say that, if you consider a hammer and a nail a rivalry, you got a pretty good one. Well, now you got a couple of hammers. And now it will be interesting to see how it plays itself out. Will the Padres catch the Dodgers this season? Not likely. They're 12 games behind. Will the Padres more than likely have to go through the Mets and or Braves to get to the Dodgers? That's some awfully high cotton. But I think going forward, this is going to be a very healthy rivalry, and I sure wish the Giants would join the party.
So does.
Oh, good luck with that.
Everyone listening, they might be. They might be.
Sorry, I couldn't help myself. Yeah. I couldn't help myself.
You got to run over the dead squirrel from time to time.
Thank you so much, Charley Steiner. We really appreciate you joining us today.
Always great talking to you guys. Thank you.
Thank you very, very much. Prices, Ray, through the roof.